welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sian. Thank you so much, as always, guys, for taking the time to join me here to learn and to grow. I'm always so grateful for all the support. As always, I have a big request right off the top, which is if you get some value from this, please do share it, whether it's putting a screenshot up on Instagram, whether it's tagging somebody on LinkedIn or sending a text to them, whatever it is, please let them know we're having these conversations that are helping ourselves, our colleagues, our profession to improve and to grow. And my amazing guest is Nancy Dewald, who you may have seen around. If you've been to any sort of staff training and lectures on those topics, you may have seen her around. She's lecturing on the circuit and all of the conferences, but she is the owner of Lead Up Training and Consulting. She is a consultant with Kleinman Performance Partners, and in 2017 was named one of the most influential women in optometry by Vision Monday. Thank you so much for being here, Nancy.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. I know we've been friends for a long time, and we've been in touch. There you go, way back actually. And I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for a while, so I'm really grateful that we're doing this now. Before we jump into it, quick tease on what we're going to be talking about. You know, Nancy's got a very large breadth of knowledge in eye care, whether it's staff training and other, sales and other things like that. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership today, specifically a program called Working Genius, which the catchphrase here is the art of getting things done, implementation in your business. So we're going to talk a lot about that, the aspects within the Working Genius program, but we're also going to hopefully, if we get a chance, talk about one of the topics that Nancy does speaking a lot about, which is blending different generations in the workplace. So hopefully we'll touch a little bit on that as well, which I think is going to be very valuable for all of us right now, especially the business owners out there who are like, I'm a Gen X or a millennial and I have Gen Zs and I need to figure out how to get everybody to work together. So hopefully we'll touch a bit on that too. So Nancy, anything you want to share about yourself before we jump into the topic of discussion?
No, I think throughout my career, I've always been passionate about helping others to be successful. And leadership has been one of the things that I've focused on a lot. You know, when we can bring our people up and support them and make them successful, it's very gratifying. So
absolutely, absolutely. Great, and I'm on a bit of a mission myself, so I'm selfish. I do this with the podcast. I admitted to it earlier as well. When I want to learn I want to learn more about something, I bring a person a guest on the podcast that I can learn from, but of course, it's always going to be a value for the listener as well. And I've been wanting to lean a bit more into leadership and becoming a better leader, so I think the timing for this is perfect.
Awesome.
So tell us about Working Genius, and what is this program? What is the benefit of it?
Okay. So Working Genius is actually a program put together by a leadership guru by the name of Patrick Lencioni. He also wrote the program, The 5 Behaviors of a Team. And what resonated with me for that program is the simplicity of it. It's about when we show up doing the things that we like, we're better at it. So he proves that burnout really isn't about doing too much work. It's about doing the wrong type of work. So when we're working in our geniuses, we're more effective, the team is more productive, and we can get things done. The second thing about that program that really attracted me to it was how we can, when we follow the steps of Working Genius, we can actually be successful implementing things. In offices, I see too often, a doctor goes to a conference, they have a great idea, they come back, they want to implement the idea and it falls flat. And nothing ever takes hold. It's so hard to get something done. And as we know in optometry, there's so many competing realities. You wear so many hats. So this program is simple and it helps you to understand, okay, how can I leverage the strengths of everybody on my team to be successful? Yeah.
You mentioned one phrase in there quickly, just to touch on this, burnout. And I think what kind of led us to having this topic on the podcast, actually, because when we spoke a week or so ago, I was actually doing a talk on burnout last week. And that what you just said is exactly, or at least is one of the core things that I mentioned in that talk is like this misalignment, I think, of the right person working on the right task, or doing something that you actually value. I think sometimes we think burnout is just working too hard or whatever it might be, but if you love what you do and it aligns with your values, you'll work day and night.
That's right.
It's not actually about how
much.
It's not work. So I think that's actually a really key point. So we can help avoid burnout, or at least reduce it, by making sure our team is working on the right things and doing the things that align with their values and their strengths.
Absolutely. And what Patrick says is every job or task or project is a 6-letter one. right? So there's 6 geniuses, and each of us has 2 geniuses. So the geniuses are the things that bring us joy. They're easy to do. They give us energy. And then there's 2 that are frustrations. These are the things that drain us. This is the stuff that you put from your to-do list to the next day, to the next day, to the next day, right? And then we have 2 competencies that neither bring us joy or drain us.
Sort of neutral, I guess.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, obviously we can do all of the things, but what are the things that we're passionate about and come easily? Now, knowing every job or task is a 6-letter job, there's a proper order to implementing something. So when we can bring the geniuses in at the right time to do their role, that's how we have success with implementing a program.
All right. I am sorry, I apologize for scrolling on my phone because you had me do this assessment. We're going to talk about this. I'm just going to pull that up. I should have had it ready. But if you could tell us the 6 types of genius, and then how that assessment works and how it's relevant, how it can be implemented in a business.
Okay, sounds good. So we start with wonder. The people with the genius of wonder like to sit in ambiguity, and you will hear them say, I wonder. They identify the need for change or improvement. They're like, I wonder if there's a better way we can do this. So that's where any project or something should start. Then we go to invention. So the people with invention love to come up with creative ideas and solutions to problems. They probably have 35 ideas for everything. Yeah. Right? So they say, I'm invention. And I always say, I have an idea. They're the ones that have lots of ideas. So from wonder, we go to discernment, because all the ideas aren't good ideas. The discerner's role is to vet the idea. No, go back to the drawing board, or that was good. If you have somebody on your team who's a discerner, they're so great at giving feedback. Now, sometimes they get a bad rap. They're seen as negative. But what I've realized since taking this program is I need a discerner so that my ideas get vetted and I don't have so many false starts.
Yeah.
So once we have the idea and we know it's good, then we need somebody to galvanize it. The galvanizer goes around and gets people behind the idea. Sometimes they might be seen as a cheerleader, but it's more about they can influence people and help them understand why this is a good idea, why it's important to the patient, to the business, to the team. So once we have everybody aligned on the idea, then we need an enabler. That was one of your geniuses. So the enabler helps, they can kind of see how the project should go. If we do this, then we do this, and they make sure that they set people up to succeed and give them the tools and resources. And then we have Tenacity. Tenacity gets it across the finish line. They're the people who like checklists, they're focused on results. So imagine, if you will, if you had a new idea from this conference and you took it back and you were strategic about how you implemented it. Here's the idea. What other things do we have on it? And then we vet it, make sure that it's gonna fit our environment. It makes sense for our environment. Then we explain to everybody, because no offense, doctors, but you forget to tell the staff why you're doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Then we get the tools in place, we implement it, and we get it across the finish line. Because all too often we go out of order. We have an idea and we go right to implementation. Nobody knows what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, right? And then we're not successful.
That certainly sounds like me.
And it happens. And another thing I see in optometry clinics a lot, because the beauty of this program is you identify everybody's geniuses and frustrations, and then you put them on a map. And then we say, the clinic I did last week, it was so fun. We identified everybody in the clinic, but one person has tenacity. So they are all detailed person, they get everything across the finish line, but we didn't have anybody galvanizing. And we didn't have anybody in the idea stage. So we never have any new ideas, which can be dangerous for a business. Patrick uses an example because an executive said to him, do we really need wonder? Like if things are going good? And he said, well, think about it. While Walmart was trying to think, how can I get more people to park in my parking lot? Amazon was bringing things to their door.
Right.
We need wonder. We need all of the geniuses.
It's a great point. It's a great point. So I love that. I love the way that they're broken down, and of course did the assessment myself and kind of read up on the different. And yes, I think the way it broke down makes sense. And you mentioned that I am an enabler as one of the things that I had, and it's so funny because over the years I would joke with people in a different environment, in a different setting, but I am an enabler. I am the person who's going to be like, okay, here's how we're going to do this thing. And it might be making plans to go out tonight, or it might be something in the practice, but that certainly is something that I tend to do. And one thing I'm not good at is checklists and like detail-oriented things. So this is where my business partner and I are kind of yin and yang. She's very detail-oriented, and I can guess where she would rank on in which geniuses would be her strengths. And luckily, some of them are overlapping and some of them are opposite. So things that I don't like doing, she can take care of.
Well, and that's the power of knowing what are my strengths and what are the things that I don't like to do. Like I said, everybody can do it all, but it's about preferences. And when you fill out the assessment, it's about what do you like to do, not what do you have to do in your role. It's about what do you like to do. And then, so when I took the program and I was running my own business, I realized I do have a million ideas, but I don't have somebody to discern those ideas. So what I did as a result, because it's the so what that's important, as a result, when I was working on an idea, if it was in a particular area, I would find an expert in that area and I'd say, here's my ideas. I want you to poke as many holes in it as you can. That way, when I went to market with an idea, the chances that it's going to be successful was a lot better.
Yeah,
you know.
Sure.
And then we do strategies like tenacity is one of my frustrations. Now, billing is tenacity, and I need to do billing in my business or I don't get paid. So you figure out, okay, how could I do this differently? I schedule time for it. I do it when my mind is fresh. You know, so it's about identifying, okay, what do I love to do? What do I struggle with? And how do I work better and smarter within that?
Right. So some of those frustrations, I get tenacity, which was the one that I ranked low on as well. So the more detail-oriented tasks and the more admin type of tasks that maybe some of us don't love. But who can we, delegate that task to? Or perhaps you have to pay somebody offsite or contract somebody to take care of those things, but at least they'll get done right. And then you don't have this is where I think burnout starts to come in, is when you're starting to do, your day is filled with those types of tasks. And one of the most common factors in burnout is admin tasks, loading up and building up on, on a lot of healthcare workers. So either blocking time just to make sure they get done and they're not interfering with all the other productive time you could have, or just giving them to somebody else who's going to take care of it for you.
Well, and that's the other thing. So it's really fun when we do team maps and we can look at it. So if we realize, we kind of have a gap in one of these, then how do we work for that? We can always hire for that task. There are people who love that admin stuff. So if we didn't have anybody in tenacity on our team, you know what? I think our next hire, we need to make sure that that's kind of what we fill, right? Yeah, and how do we work around that? So.
Yep, that's great. This reminds me a bit of the Jim Collins book, Good to Great, and one of the important lessons in there was putting the right people in the right seats on the bus, and this is our way of determining who, what seats are fitting for each of our team members. So I think it's really great that there's kind of a through line there. So how does somebody go about implementing this? I think it's important for every team to have an understanding of what our different team members' strengths are, and therefore what jobs they'll be most efficient at and enjoy. So how does somebody go about implementing this Working Genius program?
So you can go online and look up Working Genius and you can take the assessments. I also offer workshops where everybody takes the assessment and then I put together a team map. And like I said, the most important thing is everybody identifying, okay, these are my geniuses. We also talk about, like, sometimes we have judgment and guilt about geniuses we have or don't have, or what somebody else has. So we do a teamwork around that, and then we look at the map and say, okay, based on what we're seeing here and what we know, how should we function differently and what's our action plan? Yeah, so and we can even, the last one I did was remote. So it's such a simple concept that we can do something like that remote. But there's a lot of information online that you can certainly go and get a sense for it as well.
I think it sounds actually really valuable. Going back to mine here, I just want to quickly touch on a couple of, you mentioned, seen as a cheerleader, and then the judgment that kind of goes around it, because you use that term. Some people say, well, I'm not actually like leading, I'm just sort of cheering along, but it's so important to have that. You need that to get an idea, get the kind of momentum behind it, I think, a lot of times. But anyways, mine were enablement, and galvanizing. Tell me again what galvanizing is and what the value of that is.
Yeah, so galvanizing is you get people rallied around the idea, what it is you want to do. So again, think about it as implementing a project. So let's say we were going to implement in-lane handoff, all right? Now there's going to be some people that aren't going to be want to sign up for that. So the galvanizer has a natural ability to say, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's why it's important. Here's what the steps are going to be. Like, what questions do you have? How can I support you? So the galvanizer kind of rallies the troops, push them outside of their comfort zone to try different things.
Gotcha. Okay, good. I would say that does line up. You know, some of the things, if anybody's done these personality assessments or, you know, whatever tests whatever you want to call them, the questions are always quite tough to answer because they make them quite extreme. So they might say, you know, if somebody was to, would somebody say that you do this thing every single time? And I would say, well, I was looking at the question saying, I actually do this 90% of the time, perhaps. That does seem right, but not every single time. So it forces you to really make a choice. And it's a little challenging, but then it'll kind of rephrase the question a few different ways, right?
That's right.
And it sifts it out.
I think there's a lot of science behind them. And I know there's been a couple times where people are like, I don't think this is right. I don't think it's me. But when you dig a little deeper and you help them to understand it, they're like, actually, that is so me.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I looked at this and I was like, I was kind of skeptical too. And I thought, okay, enablement and galvanizing, I think that makes sense. Then the competency was invention and wonder. And I was like, well, you know what? I do sit there. I'll come up to the front desk and say, well, why is it that? Like, what if I, just totally out of the box, what if I did this? But then I don't sit there and lose time thinking about those things. And then the frustrations were discernment and tenacity. And this is where my business partner comes in, because I'll have an idea, say, we should do this. And then she'll say, well, have you thought about how, like, the downstream effect of that? No. She balances that out for me. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, that is good. It's interesting that your competencies, so there's 3 phases. There's the idea stage, the activation stage, and the implementation stage. So it's interesting that both your competencies are in the idea stage.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, you're able to do them. It's not necessarily your preference or where you spend your time, but that might be something where, as a business owner, if I was like, you know, I don't have really any of my geniuses in the idea stage. Again, who can I bring in? Who on my team is in the idea stage that I could bring in when I'm thinking about, okay, how do I improve dry eye? Or using the people around you, just because you're the leader, you don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
If you have somebody on your team, maybe you have an optician who's great at the idea stage, as you're brainstorming things, bring them in.
Yeah.
That's powerful. That's how we work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really great. You know, we're talking about in one of our other recordings today, how to kind of spot some of that genius or you know, talent or ambition in either in our associate doctors or now, as you're mentioning, in our staff. Do you have advice for an optometrist and owner usually in this scenario? One of the questions I asked the other guest was, you know, if you're an owner and you're potentially looking for a partner and you're looking long-term exit strategy, you want somebody to buy in, what kind of traits are you looking for in that person? Do you have any suggestions on that, either in an associate or in staff? What traits should we be looking for in staff that might be more involved in the business?
I think, first of all, be clear and identify what traits you need. Like, where are the gaps? What do you have covered? You know, when you think about business in general, it's about people, it's about finance, it's about processes. So which are the areas that you might have gaps? And identify what it is you're looking for. And then if you're interviewing people, you know, interview with a purpose in mind. Mm-hmm. You know, drill down on those things and see if it's a match. I think that's a good place to start. Is first of all identify what is it that you truly need.
What do you need? Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. And I like the idea of based on, you know, an assessment like this, you say, well, our team, we have lots of this and lots of this, but we're missing this type of person. Now maybe you go out actually actively looking for that type of a personality to fill the gap. Complete the puzzle. Exactly.
And it's interesting when you look at the team maps, because I can not know an office and I can look at a team map and I can know exactly what's happening. We start, if the doctor's in the idea stage, we start lots of things, we never finish anything, you know, or if we don't have the discerner, we have a lot of false starts or we don't. So it's interesting when you look at the map, you can be like, I know exactly what's happening here when we try to implement something.
Very interesting. So does that tell you something about the owner then, or the person who's hiring? Like if you do a map and you say, there's a lot of people who fit this mold, not a lot of these people. So does that tell you that that's the owner is probably that type of person too? Sometimes we hire or surround ourselves with the same type of people as us. Yeah.
So sometimes that's the case, but sometimes it's the reverse also.
It's the reverse,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So anything else before we go over to talk a little bit more about blending generations in the workplace? Any other leadership type conversations or topics that you'd like to talk to us about?
Well, the other program of his that I'm certified in is the 5 behaviors of a team.
Okay.
I think it's also very powerful. It's simple, but it's about really understanding so it's based on the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So if you flip those around, what is important? That program I was attracted to, because if you think about how much time in our lives we spend on teams, whether it's professionally or personally, but have you ever taken a course on how to be a good team player? How do you function on a team? So it really talks about, okay, as a team, what are our responsibilities? Because when you have a productive team, you get results. And everybody's happier at work.
So true.
Right? So
yeah.
it really walks through that, and it talks about, we've got to have trust. And we have to have conflict. It's important. We have to have healthy conflict, but we have to have conflict. And how do we hold each other accountable? And what does it look like to get a commitment? And at the end of the day, we need to get results. So walking through that program is really cool too, to really...
Good to know.
It's a lot about understanding each other and having a better sense of who we are and what's important, and then getting a commitment so we can move forward. And I always say, probably in every program that I teach, the number one most important thing is setting clear expectations, which is the number one thing missed. So when we set expectations for our team on how things should go, then they can come along and be supportive. But when we don't set a clear plan or expectations, that's when we're all playing from a different sheet of music.
So true. Yeah, that's so true. And I think that's certainly, I'm not surprised if that's a very common thing that gets missed, is setting those expectations. Interesting, there's various books and ideas and topics around this team thing, and there's the book, The Best Team Wins. I think that's a book, right? But there's a saying that I love, and I think it's derived from basketball, and it's the what's the right word? You want the 5 best players, not the best 5 players. And if that makes sense, you don't just need an all-star at every position. You need the best team. You need the best cohesive unit. And I think that applies at work as well, as how do you fill all those different roles and work together?
Yeah, absolutely. They have to be aligned. And the last point on it of results is you need to have a team result. Like, we need to be striving for the same thing, aligned on the same page.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. So I think there's a lot for us who are trying to improve in our leadership roles that we can learn from that. So let's talk about generations and blending generations at work. I've done a little bit of talking about this as far as from a consumer perspective. Different generations are looking for different things, have different expectations, but trying to blend that in at work, that can become quite the challenge. So give us we got a few minutes. I know this is a big topic and you do a whole talk on this. But tell us a little bit about high level, like what we should be looking for and ways that we can approach that.
Yeah, it is a big topic and it can be a challenge. But in my research, and what I'll talk about tomorrow in my session, is actually more alike than we are different. But we tend to focus on what divides us versus what unites us. So when I went through the generations and the characteristics, I realized, we're actually very much the same. In fact, our DNA is 99.9% the same.
Yeah.
But yet we focus on that 0.01% that's different. So yeah, we do have to adjust a little bit. It's not about equality, treating everybody the same. It's about equity. How do we give people what they need so they can be their best self at work? They can bring their best self to work. Some of the topics and strategies we're going to talk about on how do we do this is we talk about communication. How do we communicate using different formats? Some like face-to-face, some like to, digitally. Teaching ourselves about things like bias and empathy and really understanding where people are coming from. Because at the end of the day, our experiences in life create our beliefs, which in turn create our actions. So when we take the time to get to know somebody, we understand what their experience is, then we can understand what their actions are.
So true.
So, it's just getting back to the basics, being curious to get to know somebody versus criticizing somebody. So those are some of the key strategies, train your staff on things like empathy and biases. Adjust and understand what is important to your different employees and adjust as much as you can. We're not a Google of the world. We can't have play tennis and have ping pong and, and beanie chairs, but what can we do? Yeah. If you have somebody who is in charge of your billing, could they work off-site sometimes?
Right.
You know, are we offering phased-out retirement plans? Are we offering, you know, student loan support? Just being a little bit creative and seeing what is it that they need, because there are a lot of things that we can do. Yeah. So stop focusing on what divides us and focus on what unites us.
I like that. That's so true. And we are much more alike than we are different. I really like that. And that reminds me of, you know, it's as simple as like a children's book. One of the books I read to my daughter at bedtime is that, you know, we look at each other and think we're so different, but, you know, we all have so many similarities and commonalities. And empathy, you know, I like to say empathy is like a magical power, to be honest. It really can help you just see your people differently and connect on such a different level that creates a bond that is going to be much stronger. So I think that's something that we need to lean into a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, we're human, we're wired for connection. We all want to be seen, you know, so that means we've got to slow down. We've got to be a little bit more intentional with our leadership.
Yeah.
And be present for our team.
That's amazing. Thank you. So Nancy, any other final words you want to share before we wrap up here, whether it's on leadership, whether it's on generations, or anything else that you would like to share?
You know, I think I would just really reinforce, be present, take the time, and get to know your team. They joined you for a reason, and sometimes we're just so busy and we don't give them the time and energy they deserve. When you hired them, they showed up and they were a great employee. If something's changed, it's not always them. So sometimes we've got to take a closer look at that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is an interesting note to leave on. So if something's changed, it's not always them. There may be other places we need to look. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate this. This was amazing. I'm sure going to need to have you back on because we just touched kind of the tip of the iceberg
on the
and there's so many things that you speak on, and you have expertise in so many different spaces that I think we can easily have you back on multiple times to talk about different things. But for today, at least, thank you for making the time. I know you're busy.
Thank you for having me.
Nancy came straight out of lecture. She just finished a 2-hour lecture. I went and grabbed her. She was like still talking to attendees who were from the audience asking her questions. Like, I got to record this. So she came over and did this immediately after. So thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Once again, big thanks to OSI for having us here. We're at the White Oak Resort in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Big thank you to OSI here at the OSI Summit. Big thanks to our production team, LCA Productions, Ilona and Alex. Thank you guys for doing an amazing job once again. Look at this beautiful setup. And thank you to you, everybody who's listening and watching to the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. We'll see you guys in the next episode.